I would like to open up the City Council meeting for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for January 22nd, 2018. If you would stand, we're pleased to have Scout Troop number 329 present the colors and help us with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'd please stand for the presentation of the colors. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Thank you very much to Troop 329. We had a brief meeting with the Scouts prior to tonight's meeting. I'm really excited to have them here, and I appreciate Councilor Urban joining me for that presentation. Thank you. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Zachary Urban,
Present.
Janice Hoppy,
Present.
George Pond,
Present.
Christy Davis,
Here.
Tim Fitzgerald,
Here.
Larry Matthews,
Here.
Leah Dozeman.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Duran excused herself for this evening, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We have no meetings, no minutes in tonight's City Council package, and we do not have any proclamations, and we've already had our ceremony. We have citizens' right to speak, so this is the opportunity for citizens to come forward, and I have a list that's coming up now. Thank you. We have on Citizens' Right to Speak, our first speaker is Miss Dorothy Archer, and Mr. Bob Brazel is on deck.
Good evening, Council. My name is Dorothy Archer, A-R-C-H-E-R, 3640 Marshall. Good evening, Mayor Starker, Council, staff, and citizens. The packets that you are receiving before you might help you in a decision that I continue to pursue. These papers came from Edgewater. I spoke with the Planning Commission. I've made copies for each of you, as they no longer have 35 feet in their city. They are more than willing to speak with you if you need to address how they went about this. On the top is a card, business card, from a planner, Jonathan Moore in Arvada. I spoke with him personally on the 35 feet. They now are beginning to address this situation. Quote, they realize the 35 feet is no longer an acceptable height blanket form. They're going to address it. He also said he would be willing to work with you and speak with anybody. I went to Lakewood Planning. I spoke with the lady there. At this point, they are not getting people who are buying the houses and scraping them and going up 35 feet. But she says, I will tell you, we have very strict regulations in our city. She says they must be met before a home can be built. If council wishes to address any questions to the papers that I have in front of you, I would be more than welcome to answer them the best to my ability. I spoke with David Mann. Maybe some of you remember. He and his parents purchased the home on 32nd and Teller with a request that they build a home adjacent to the farmhouse that's there and a duplex to the north of it. I complimented him on the beauty of these structures, but I says I'm very inquisitive to know how high is the home on 32nd Avenue. He says not quite 30 feet, and it does have a sloped roof. The duplex to the north is 27 feet. With consideration, he said, to the neighbors to the east of him, they put the one-story garage so that the people have the sun coming in. He says, I believe in keeping the neighbors in consideration. He also is in the process of building the new requirement, 35 feet, with a 15-foot bulk plane. If you want to drive by and see, he's following your rules, but they're certainly not complementary to the bungalows and the ranch-style homes. I will continue to come every week if I need to, forever, because this 35-foot allowance and a 15-foot bulk plane is not compliant to especially East Wheat Ridge. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Archer. Our next speaker is Bob Brazel and Michael Ilo on deck.
Bob Brazel, 3830 Carr Street, Brazell. I'm sure you can spell Bob. It's simple. After the last couple of meetings, I've heard people get up and talk about ADUs and how they want you to address ADUs and all this other stuff. And one of them a couple of meetings ago said, well, you know, I have a house, and I bought the house, and it has a really nice area in the back where I could make a really nice carriage house and all this other stuff. Well, you know, if they wanted to own a duplex, they should have bought a duplex. You got approximately, 20 houses on each block. Why should one person be able to overrule 19 other people? People buy their houses with the zoning that is there. Just to up and change the zoning and allow rental properties, ADUs, and that's all they are, is rental properties. No matter what they say, they're trying to get income properties. That's just not fair to the other neighbors. Zoning is zoning. When you buy your house, you know what the zoning is. Don't think just because you want to do something different than everybody else that your rights exceed everybody else's rights. It's a very, very selfish attitude some of these people have. And all it will do is depreciate the property values and crowd the streets with cars and traffic, which we don't need. We don't need a lot more people in Wheat Ridge besides for what some people in this city think. That's why our values stay high, and that's why we've never really gone down in value like our neighbors in Lakewood and Arvada that are close to us. When properties values have gone down, Wheat Ridge has always pretty much held its own because we don't have this kind of nonsense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brazel. Mr. Ilo is our next speaker. you want to just pass them, we'll pass them down. Thank you.
Michael Ilo, I-L-L-O.
Get me one of those for the record, for the packet. I would appreciate it.
Oh, can I get it later? Okay, sure. Michael Ilo, I-L-L-O, 11302 West 38th Avenue. What I'm speaking about today is how do our public representatives represent themselves? The packet, to explain, the picture on the right of page 1 is a profile picture of somebody, and they're using a publicly elected office to describe them. So they're not just representing themselves as a person. This isn't a personal attack against a person, it's how the public office is being represented publicly and privately. Everything inside the packet was during the time when this public representative was representing this public office in this way. And so these are all representations of the public office. There's numerous derogatory statements and incitements, and there's requests for me personally to argue with people, negative things being said about other people in our city, other board members, stuff like that. And again, if this is just a regular citizen, that's one thing. We all have the right to free speech, but I want to talk about how do we represent a publicly funded and elected office that people are sworn to represent or serve the public. It seems to me a conflict of interest when somebody's personal political aspirations or their emotions regarding a family member or whatever come out, and they're using a publicly funded office to represent these. And I think the public office is represented in a way, in my opinion, it's to influence people. That's the only reason I can think to use an office name to represent your opinions. So I would just like, you to kind of digest this. I really would hope that there could be some kind of protocol for how elected representatives conduct themselves. This example I'm using is the only example I have ever been witness to of anybody. I have been friends, I have friended people on Facebook and whatnot from numerous people who are elected in our city, and I've never received anything trying to goad me into an argument or saying derogatory things of this nature. When somebody publicly takes themselves off of a public forum and then they privately go behind the scenes and try to instigate arguments while they're pretending to be above all this negativity, I just think this is deceitful, and it doesn't bode well for how our city looks in general. It makes the whole city government structure look suspect. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ilo. That's all the people that I had signed up to speak. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak now under public comment on any items that are not on the agenda? Thank you. We have the agenda here. Are there any changes to the agenda the council would like to make at this time? Okay, the agenda will stand approved. We will move to item number 1, which is the consent agenda. Ms. Hoppy, would you please introduce this item for us?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to introduce the consent agenda, item 1, A through E. A, motion to approve the purchase of a 2018 vehicle replacements and the purchase and installation of lighting, auxiliary, and communications equipment in the total amount not to exceed $351,897. B, motion to appoint Jerry DiTullio as City Director to the Wheat Ridge Business District Board of Directors, term to expire March 31st, 2021. C, Resolution 09-2018, amending the fiscal year 2018 general fund budget in the amount of $6,698 for the purpose of appropriating grant awards for the purchase and installation of a bike and pedestrian counter on the Clear Creek Trail and for a pergola and fruit trees at Happiness Gardens. D, motion to approve payment to Colorado Intergovernmental Risk Sharing Agency, CIRSA, for the 2018 workers' compensation premium in the amount of $304,536 and the 2018 property and casualty premium in the amount of $231,139. And E, motion to approve 2018 payment to Renewal Wheat Ridge in the amount of $300,000.
Mr. Goff, we typically don't have a staff presentation. Is there anything that you want to say on these?
Only if there's questions.
Okay. Are there any questions of staff? Then a motion would be in order.
Thank you. I move to approve the consent agenda items A through E as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Ms. Hoppy and a second from Mr. Urban. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 7-1. I'm 7-0. I'm sorry.
Thank you. We will have, we'll move on to item number 2. Ms. Davis, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you. Council Bill Number 02-2018, an ordinance extending the temporary moratorium on the submission, acceptance, processing, and approval of applications and requests for a permit, license, land use approval, or other approval for a freestanding emergency room. The issue in April of 2017, the council adopted a one-year moratorium on the submission, acceptance, processing, and approval of applications and requests related to freestanding emergency rooms. This ordinance extends the moratorium period for an additional 120 days to and including August 27, 2018.
I would like to open the public hearing. This is an ordinance on second reading. It is not a quasi-judicial. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff report on this?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Dahl, our City Attorney, will provide a brief status report.
Mr. Dahl?
Council, you have the authority to enact a moratorium while you're looking at regulations on various subjects. This moratorium has been extended once already for a year. We expected perhaps the legislature would have regulations on freestanding emergency rooms in their last session, but they did not. The legislature's back in session. There's some expectation that the legislature may well act again this year. This moratorium extension only extends for an additional 120 days, so 4 months, and that will take us through the legislative session this year. From April to August is the extension on this moratorium. All of the issues are the same, and I think it's appropriate for the city to continue to defer and have moratorium on these permits while it looks at what the state does and can therefore react in terms of whatever local regulations, if any, it wants to adopt.
Thank you. I would open this up for any public comment. Is there any members of the public? I don't have anyone signed up for this item. Okay, let's move into
Is the motion in order?
a motion is in order.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve Council Bill Number 02-2018, an ordinance extending the temporary moratorium on the submission, acceptance, processing, and approval of applications and requests for a permit, license, land use approval, or other approval for a freestanding emergency room facility on second reading, and that it take effect 15 days after final publication.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Ms. Davis and a second by Mr. Fitzgerald. Before we discuss this, I would like to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion
Mayor?
on the motion?
You might, before you close the public hearing, I could assign an ordinance number.
I'd be happy for you to assign an ordinance number.
Okay, this is going to be ordinance number 1634.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, would the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, we will move to council item number 3. Mr. Urban, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council Bill number 03-2018, an ordinance amending Chapter 7 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws regarding elections to ensure consistency and compatibility with the Colorado municipal election laws.
I would like to open the public hearing. Madam Clerk, should I ask for an ordinance number on this?
You can. This will be ordinance number 1635.
Thank you. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff report on this?
We do. Jerry Dahl will also provide a staff report on this item.
Mr. Dahl.
Council, over the years, this chapter has gotten a little shorter. Many municipalities, for their municipal elections, simply defer to the state laws on the subject. There's complex and detailed state municipal election laws. The city's elections are in November, so they're always coordinated elections with the county. And we have shortened in the past this chapter, and there are still some sections, and they're the 5 sections that are listed as being repealed, that really are adequately covered by state law. And the issue has always been, here in Wheat Ridge, that when the first section in this particular chapter adopts all the state statutes. And that's great, but every time there's a change to reporting requirements, for example, or reporting amounts, we have to change Chapter 7. And honestly, we always have deferred to state statute, and that's what the city clerk and I always rely on. So these remaining 5 sections are recommended for repeal by this ordinance. Now, this will retain, or this will not repeal, certain sections that are specific to the city. For example, the section adopting the state election laws. Firstly, there's a section on residency requirements for elected officials. That's obviously something that's specific to the city, and that's not being repealed here either. The section on violations and penalties, write-in candidate affidavits are all retained. But the sections that you see for reporting requirements, filing the violations and penalties that are state-level violations and automatic recount are all addressed by the state election laws. And we recommend that we repeal them so that we aren't in the position every few years of having to amend them so that they match up with the state statute that you're intending to follow anyhow. That's the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl. I'd like to open this up for any public comment. Is there anyone here in the public who would like to come and testify on this matter? I don't see anyone, so we'll close the public comment. Do we have questions of council for staff?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to add some information for council because some of this is probably, so far in the weeds that it's nothing that's really going to affect anybody very much anyway. But there's one aspect of this that will affect you folks, and that is the reporting requirements. Currently, our code requires only 2 financial reports. One is 11 days before the election and one 30 days after the election. By enacting this ordinance, we will go to state statutes, and now there will be 3 reporting requirements, and they are 21 days before the election, the Friday before the election, and 30 days after the election. So just wanted you all to be aware of that we're doing that. And just about every city that I know of in Jefferson County, they all go by those same dates. So we were sort of had our own little odd thing with only 2 requirements. And actually, I think this is good because with the advent of mail ballots, and we have, even just for our city elections, it's always a mail ballot. And to have a financial reporting requirement of 11 days before the election, it's like the ballots are already out, and it's kind of, it's too late to use that information for anybody if you wanted to. So the 21 days will accommodate the mail-out ballots better. So, and give the public a little more information about who's contributing to who or what issue, and committees and so on and so forth. So it's actually provides a heightened level of transparency for the public.
Thank you. Mr. Dahl, I had a couple of things here. I saw this, and the report from staff was thankfully brief, but actually left me with a few questions about, where am I going to find the answers on the municipal election law? And I did a quick Google search for municipal election law, the Colorado Revised Statutes for Title 31, some 80 pages of documents, and then I went to the other, sort of the predecessor, I assume, ordinance that would, or law that would govern this. It's sort of 325 pages, if I think. Are we going to have the opportunity to have this information distilled into a usable, readable form, so that a citizen wanting to run for office wouldn't need either A, to be a lawyer, or B, retain a legal staff in order to do that?
Certainly. We, before elections, always do put together packages of information for candidates and persons running again. All the cities I represent do a form of that. We'll certainly, I'd be pleased to sit down with the city clerk and look at what we have been doing as the new candidate packet. That we put together materials, the charter and other materials for new candidates, and really assist them in understanding what the process is. I'm happy to sit down with the clerk and make certain that we extract that pretty well. The Secretary of State's office does similar publications that are very helpful, and we can make certain that the information that you really need as a candidate is available to you without having to go to Title 31 CRS.
Okay, thank you very much, because I think we should encourage citizens to run for office. I think that's good for all of us, and I think you should have the rules and regulations readable and understandable, so that we all try to follow them. So thank you very much for your efforts. Any other, Mr. Urban?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question's for the city attorney as it relates to the election commission, and wanting to know whether these changes, that it doesn't appear that they would have any effect on the election commission.
No, election commission's retained.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions of staff? Seeing none, we're ready to vote. Would the clerk please poll the council?
We have
Oh, I guess we ought to have a motion first. Okay, Mr. Urban, would you give us a motion?
All right, I move to approve Council Bill 03-2018, an ordinance amending Chapter 7 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws regarding elections to ensure consistency and compatibility with the Colorado municipal election laws, on second reading, to take effect immediately upon passage as provided by Section 5-13 of the Charter.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Urban, a second by Ms. Hoppy. Is there further discussion on the motion? Now I see none, and we can poll the council, please.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. We will move now to item number 4. Mr. Matthews, would you introduce that for us, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a motion to award a contract to Design Concepts, Inc. in a not-to-exceed amount of $175,695 for the purpose of preparing and design and construction documents for Prospect Park renovations Phase 2. At issue is Prospect Park is in need of renovation and updating to meet the needs of individuals as well as large user groups that visit the park daily. The improvements associated with this project are intended to provide an updated park that addresses how people use parks today and effectively improve the function of the park for the current uses and park goers. A master plan prepared by Design Concepts, Inc. for renovation of Prospect Park has been completed and approved. Phase 1 is under construction. The scope of this contract includes design development, preparation of construction documents, bidding, and bid analysis services for Phase 2.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this item?
We do. Joyce Manwaring here is here, our Parks and Rec Director.
Thank you. I just want to explain that Phase 2 includes the northwest side of Prospect Park, where there'll be some pickleball courts constructed, as well as improvements to the lake edge. And then it also replaces the pavilion on the south side of the park, as well as a new trail, a new entry into that area. So we're very excited for Phase 2 to begin, and depending on grant funding and the market at bidding, we're hoping to accomplish all the scope of Phase 2.
Thank you, Ms. Manwaring. Do we have questions for staff? Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is regarding the engineering services that are included in this as it relates to the conditional letter of map revisions and the letter of map revisions. And I'm curious, it indicates that that's not something that you want to have to do, but there's a $20,000 set aside for that. And so my first question is, if we're not intending to use those services because we don't want to impact the floodplain, then why do we have that dollar amount in there?
That's why it is worded not to exceed, and we can certainly do it the other way as well, come back for those funds if we do have to submit a CLOMR and LOMR. And I know it's not always related to whether you wish to impact it, but if there are any impacts at all, it has to be analyzed and you have to get a permit. So always the first priority is to not raise or lower the floodplain. Sure. But occasionally, if the design is dependent on it, and I'm not an engineer, but they feel like it's an acceptable permit to request, we have the not to exceed amount so we can keep moving forward on the project. But it won't be spent unless we absolutely need it.
Sure. And I guess just my follow-up, it's not really a question, but just a concern as it relates to any impact to the floodplain there, that it doesn't cause any downstream problems for the residential neighborhood east and also south of the park as well.
Thank you. Are there further questions of staff? Seeing none, may I please have a motion?
I move to award contract to Design Concepts, Inc. in the not-to-exceed amount of $175,695 for the purpose of preparing the design and construction documents for Prospect Park renovation, Phase 2.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Matthews and a second by Ms. Dozman. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Ms. Dozman, would you please introduce item number 5?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Resolution number 08-2018, a resolution accepting a watercolor painting by artist Charlotte Talbert. So at issue, the request has been received by the Cultural Commission to accept the donation of a painting by artist Charlotte Talbert to the City of Wheat Ridge. Per the Public Art Management Plan process, City Council approval is required for final acceptance of public art. This request was received from Friends of the Artist.
Thank you. Mr. Goff, do we have a presentation?
We do have a presentation. Joyce Manwaring, again, our Parks and Rec Director, and I believe we have guests, Friends of the Artist, in the audience that will present the work of art to the city.
Ms. Manwaring.
I'll just, a few comments. And I know Mo Keller is also, I believe, signed up to speak on the agenda, but she'd like to make a few comments. So per our Public Art Management Plan, it is City Council's responsibility or privilege to accept permanent pieces of art to the city's art collection. So that's why we're here tonight. And we have the piece of art for your viewing, so I'll hold that up. I'll let Mo speak first.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mo Keller, K-E-L-L-E-R, and I live at 4325 Iris Street, specifically the Talbert subdivision. This past May, late May, I believe, Charlotte Talbert, who had been our neighbor for 40 years, passed away. She was 93 years old. Her father built all the homes in our subdivision, which is why it's called the Talbert subdivision. She founded the Wheat Ridge Art League in 1974, had been president of that art league multiple times over 30 years. And she was also on the Wheat Ridge Carnation Festival board for at least 20 years. I actually don't have the parameters of the dates, but it was about 20 years. And all of the Art League presentations during the Carnation Festival in the Anderson Building were set up by her, and she ran those for all of those years. So when she passed away, we, as some of the neighbors, decided that it would be a fitting gesture in her memory to have one of her paintings. We purchased it, and we wanted to donate it to the city in her honor and her memory, either at City Council chambers or perhaps the Active Adult Center, where the Wheat Ridge Art League still meets and has classes and things like that. So we're willing to create a plaque. I've talked to Julie Brissom about putting together some history. There's quite a bit more about Charlotte that I don't know personally, but some of the other neighbors do, and we're going to get together and work all that out. But we would be very honored if the city would be willing to accept this picture on her memory and behalf.
Thank you very much. Here's the artwork. Oh, beautiful. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak on this item? Does council have any questions on this item for the staff? Okay, a motion is in order. Ms. Dozman.
I move to approve resolution number 08-2018, a resolution accepting a watercolor painting by artist Charlotte Talbert.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by, pardon me, Ms. Dozman, a second by Mr. Matthews. Is there any discussion on the motion? Ms. Hoppy.
I'd just like to say thank you to the neighbors and for thinking of us and for considering donating the watercolor. It's very beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. That concludes our business portion. We'll move to city managers matters. Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just have a quick update on a project, and I need some visuals for this, so pardon me while this gets fired up here. Let's see. Just a quick diagram. Oops. Okay, is that not going to open? It worked in practice. Oh, should I just decline this? Quit, that's what I want. There we go. I want to reopen this. Open with, guess it was Word, maybe it opens. Well, that's weird. It opened earlier. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. The update I want to give you tonight is on the Ridge Home property that's located in Wheat Ridge. Gave council an update several months ago, I believe, through an email, pretty extensive email. But Jefferson County, specifically Jefferson County Department of Human Services, is looking at acquiring this piece of property. So it's the property that's outlined in red. It's owned by the state of Colorado, and it's currently under Ag 1 zoning. The buildings on the northern portion of the property are currently vacant, and this structure here is multiple houses, and it's surrounded by a privacy wall, and that building is still in operation. And there are individuals in the state correction system. Some type of, if our chief was here, he could explain it. They're not, I don't think it's not a high security prison or jail, but they're folks that have different types of disabilities that do not fit into the correctional system in other areas. So that property is still on there. So Jefferson County, again, is looking to acquire this property. That has to be done through a legislative process through the state of Colorado. So they have drafted some legislation, and they do have sponsors on both sides of the aisle, and both in the Senate and the House and the Representatives. And the bill potentially could be introduced in March or April of this year to transfer the property from the state to the Jefferson County Department of Human Services. Jefferson County Department of Human Services intent is to use it, potentially the project or the property, for their Jeffco Prosperity Project. And just to read from their mission statement, the Jeffco Prosperity Project is a collaboration of community, school, business, and county partners working together to help Jefferson County families break the cycle of generational poverty. The Prosperity Project assists young children and families in poverty, foster educational and family success. Prosperity Project is a shared idea among partners to reduce poverty. So it's at the very initial steps to see if they can even acquire the property. But since it's in Wheat Ridge, I wanted to give you a heads up that this was going on. There's no final plans of what it would look like. There's no financing in place. I believe the intent is for the state, if the transfer takes place, it would be a no-fee transfer, but I think there's some stipulations that the buildings on the site, except for the institutional buildings that I mentioned, will come down, have to be come down, and the site has to be cleaned up. So the county at some point may come to City Council and ask for assistance in funding or being a partner in the program. The idea, again, is to provide resources for the Prosperity Project and additional wraparound services that these individuals and families would need, such as daycare and health care and other services that would help these families get out of poverty. So we can invite Jefferson County and others to a future City Council member, or they've suggested that we hold a joint council member with the City of Arvada, since this does border Arvada in several of their neighborhoods. But that would probably be out at least 90 days. But if you'd want something sooner, we can try to arrange something also. So if there's any questions or comments, there's not a lot to tell you about the project, but I just want to make sure that this gets out and everybody understands this is.
Questions from council,
happening.
Mr. Matthews?
Yeah, I understand the several buildings to the north there are deserted and have been subject to homeless occupation by default. They've been breaking in up there. Since this would be, I'm curious, since this will be owned by Jefferson County, but it's within our city limits, whose building codes and what have you would be taking precedence, and would public comments from our citizens once a use is finally decided on what would be the procedure followed in those applications?
Sure. Everything would fall under the city's processes and codes. And I guess Ken's at the table now. He could probably speak to this if he'd like. But and we've made the county aware of that this property would require the full process of going through entitlements, zoning, if it needs rezoned, and subdivisions, and everything that any development that comes through Wheat Ridge would have to go through, and the public process also.
Okay, additional questions from council? Mr. Urban?
Just a question on the zoning as it relates to being A1. Is that because it's a state-owned property and therefore all state-owned properties, unless otherwise designated as an A1, or how is it an A1?
I don't know, can you have a background on that?
I don't have the history, but I don't think there's any particular reason other than, that there's a lot of property that's zoned A1 in that part of town. So, when we incorporated the 1969, we actually, just generally speaking, adopted the county zoning map, and that could well be what it was zoned when it was originally incorporated into the city.
So the buildings being on there might be a non-conforming use then at present?
Correct.
Okay. And my understanding is the Jefferson County Housing Authority is also interested in this property in addition to the Human Services Department.
Yes, they're one of the partners. Whoever the final ownership is still to be determined if it would be the housing authority or the county or a partnership, maybe a public-private partnership.
Thank you.
So a lot of discussions to be had, and a lot of public discussions that will be had if this moves forward. But you may see some legislation at the State House coming up soon, so I want to make sure that you're aware of this project.
Thank you.
Mr.
Any further questions from staff? Ms. Shaver.
I just wanted to kind of chime in about the agricultural zoning. When I was a little kid, there were when Ridge Home was Ridge Home. If you don't know what Ridge Home is, I'll tell you later. But there were barns on there, and I remember the cows, and they had probably a dairy operation, and who knows what. I don't know what all kind of agricultural stuff they had there, but there was kind of a farm aspect to it. So maybe that's why.
Okay. Anything further in city manager matters?
That's it for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dahl, any city attorney matters?
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Okay. Mr. DiTullio, any city treasurer matters?
Yes, thank you. On January 17th, Local Works had a Pints and Policy discussion. They had about 25 citizens show up. I was there, plus Scott Brink from Public Works and Guy Namiash from the Parks Commission to talk about the 2E projects. And so I had passed out this flyer and answered questions to the public about 2E projects. I kind of wanted to just read these quickly because this is also public information. So city issued bonds in the amount of $33 million on May 2nd, 2017, based on voter-approved half-cent sales tax and use tax. I invested bonds in a CSAFE account that initially bearing a 0.98% interest rate. That rate has increased to 1.4% as of January 16th. The year-end projection for interest earnings, that's for 2017, will be approximately $251,406. And then this is what we talked about too, about having to go back to the voters for 2017 funds of the overage. The city is projected to bring in more than $3.7 million originally projected for the first year of the increased sales and use tax. That's a discussion the council will have to have about going back to the voters for that additional funds because of the use tax on the storm that brought it over $3.7 million. And then overall updates, I've moved $5 million of city funds to a second CSAFE account that yields a higher rate of interest of 1.4 as of January 16th. And so that goes back to this second report that I gave you, the total funds report. This is for December of 2017. What you'll see is that in the CSAFE account, that's a liquid account, that 1.2 million is basically CDs and bonds that have matured. I'm moving them to a liquid account. But in January, you'll see that CSAFE account increase by 5 million, and the liquid accounts bank will go down by 5 million. So we're earning a higher interest rate. Both are liquid, and both are accessible for the city in case of emergency, but the interest rate's going to be way higher, and so we should see a lot higher profit on interest earned by the public on their tax dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DiTullio. Elected official matters, Mr. Matthews.
Not tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hoppy.
Yes, thank you. Councilor Dozeman and I would like to request the topic of a tree removal and trim or replacement grant program be added to a future study session. If there's timing, we'd prefer it to be in the early spring so that for seasonal reasons, if we do decide to move forward with it, that it'll be appropriate during the season.
Duly noted. Mr. Fitzgerald, will you put that down on your Mayor Pro Tem duty-to-do list? Ms. Dozeman.
Nothing at this time. Thank you, Councilwoman Hoppy, for bringing that up.
Ms. Davis.
I had nothing, but is there a way that I could kind of tag on to Ms. Hoppy's and Ms. Dozeman's request and maybe even consider some type of mulching program? Because I know we've had a lot of residents asking about some type of mulching program for our residents, so maybe we could look into something like that with that program.
I think you could do that if you say please.
Please.
Thank you. Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank the Boy Scouts of Troop 329 for coming tonight. It wasn't exactly the most contentious meeting we've ever had, so I apologize for the lack of fireworks here. Not that that's required, but I know that one of the elements in your communication merit badge is to try to figure out a particular issue and try to come up with two sides of it, and I don't know that we gave that here tonight, but come back another night and you might get a different show. So, but thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Pond.
Nothing further tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fitzgerald.
I was going to tell Christy that saying thank you will make her suggestion much better. Just to, yeah,
I may have to gavel you out of order for that.
Yes. Somebody chose that as a 1 out of 5, I think. Just to answer or say something to Mr. Brazel, the city manager is actively involved in discussing the renewal projects for the city, and we're going to be discussing that at a later date. And we will probably, as a result of that, also discuss accessory dwelling units. So it's coming. So things don't happen instantly. And George and I are going to have a citizen listening session on March 10th at 9:30 at the, what is the name of that place? Morningstar, right, at Morningstar on Kipling and 38th in the meeting room upstairs.
Thank you. I would like to express my sincere thanks to Troop 329 for helping us with the flag ceremony, for coming in and finding out about our city government and coming and listening to the debate that happens in this chamber. Our government exists for you, and we appreciate you coming and learning about it and becoming involved citizens when you're able to become involved citizens now. And we appreciate you coming and appreciate you learning about how our government works and becoming more involved in it. I would like to thank the Parks Department and the staff for acquiring the beautiful painting from Charlotte Talbert. I'm eager to see that reframed and hung in one of our facilities. And with that, that's the end of our business. Our meeting is concluded. We will start our study session in about 5 minutes. Thank you. 18. Do we have, I'd like to start with citizen comment on this agenda item, which is contract billing. I don't see anybody signed up, but I want to open it up to the floor. If anyone would like to come and talk on this item, you may do so now. Okay, I don't see anyone signed up, no one here, so ready to talk. Mr. Goff, do you have a staff presentation for us?
We do. We do have a brief presentation from our Community Development Director, Ken Johnstone.
Thank you, Mayor Patrick. Here tonight to give you an update on a proposed change in our building division, which is part of the Community Development Department. Been a very busy division this year, as you're all, I think, well aware. The city has always, or for many, many years at least, had a contract with an outside professional services firm to conduct a portion of our building division functions. Our core functions are issuing contractors licenses, issuing building permits, conducting plan reviews, and conducting inspections and certificates of occupancy associated with those building permits. The scope of work for that contract firm has varied quite a bit. It fluctuates quite a bit, really based on a few factors. Work volume, of course, how busy we are, and of course that's been, this year, the answer's been very busy because of the storm. Whether or not we're fully staffed at any given time, so if we have staff vacancies, then obviously we need to rely on the contract firm for more of that workload. And then the third reason that it fluctuates is just depending on what skill sets that we have on city staff versus what we need to contract out to. It's difficult to hire building inspectors that have every trade, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, have every certification in both residential and commercial. So it's typically necessary to contract out some of those specialty trades most of the time when we don't have a specific skill set in what's a relatively small division. The typical staffing FTE for the building division has been the same for probably 4 or 5 years. We have 2 permit techs and 3 either combination inspector or plans reviewers. There's some overlap there. Typically, we haven't had a need to have necessarily a full-time plans reviewer, so that too ebbs and flows. And then, of course, the chief building official is the building division manager for the building division. In 2017, really 2 significant events occurred relative to our contract inspection role. One, we had a bid process. Periodically, we bid out that work for different firms to competitively bid on. And this year, a new firm actually bid the work, Charles Abbott Associates. They're based in California, but have offices also in several other states, including Georgia and Nevada. So, a decent-sized firm. We were very impressed with them in the interview process and ultimately awarded them the contract. We've been working with them under a letter of agreement since mid-April, when our previous firm departed actually fairly quickly, unfortunately, and we were very fortunate that Charles Abbott was able to come in quickly and fill that gap. Fast forward just 2 weeks, and the other major event that happened relative to our contract inspection firm was we got really busy after the May 8th hailstorm. And again, we were really fortunate that Charles Abbott had the depth of resources that they could bring in inspectors from Georgia and Nevada and California on a temporary basis, though it's been 10 months, to meet that dramatic increase in work volume. So we were adding as many as 4 additional permit technicians and as many as 6 different inspectors on any given day to meet the workload that we had, chiefly as a result of the storm. But I think it is important to point out that we're also just busy on a general basis. We're well over projections for revenues and associated work volume even without the storm. So it's been a busy year, and that's great. So we were able to generally maintain. We had a little blip as we kind of recalibrated after that initial inundation of literally like 1,000 permits one day when the roof crisis initially hit. So we had to kind of recalibrate, but we've been able to maintain that next day inspection protocol, and we're able to turn around plan reviews back to our standard expectations again as well, and that we reset that fairly quickly, I think, after that initial blip that where we fell behind, frankly. City Council may be somewhat less aware that it's been, frankly, challenging over the past several years to keep the building division fully staffed. The chief building official position has been vacant for more often than not for the past 3 to 4 years. We had Michael Ariano in that position up until February of this year. He was a fine building official, came to us from Texas, and ultimately moved back to his home state of New Mexico for family reasons. The position's been vacant since. In the memo, and I've also attached a document from a group called City Lab that kind of, and there are other documents out there that kind of say the same thing, but for whatever reason, the building inspection field as a profession has not really kept itself fully staffed and on a nationwide level. There just aren't, it's a very competitive industry, and it hasn't just kept up in terms of maintaining the number of professionals that are really in demand out there to work for contract firms or to work for local governments. They have an aging talent pool, and they just haven't been fully replacing that talent pool with enough people to really meet the growing demands. And that's really been a big part of our challenge in trying to recruit into the positions. The CBO position is a very limited talent pool. The building inspector similarly is a limited talent pool. So it's been challenging. So all those factors have really led us to explore a new business model, which is to fully outsource our building division services, which with Charles Abbott and Associates, and that certainly isn't a unique model that we'll be diving into. As I note in the staff report, there's certainly several other cities, including Centennial and Denver, who farm out a portion, or in the case of Centennial and several smaller jurisdictions, their entire building division function. It's in looking at that new model, I think it's, of course, very important to understand budgetary impacts, and we provided some numbers in your staff memo that describe what that would have looked like had we been operating in that model in the budget years 2014, 15, and 16. It certainly varies year to year by a number of different factors, and the numbers, the raw numbers that I provided in the staff memo only reflect kind of the hard costs that are easy to quantify. And in 2 of the years, it would have been slightly more expensive to go with this model, and 1 of the years, it would have been slightly less expensive to go with this full contract service model. A couple other things to factor into that consideration that I didn't quantify but did qualitatively note in the staff report. We will not be having to provide vehicles, mobile devices, won't be having to fill gas tanks. So there's a lot of those costs that'll be absorbed by Charles Abbott as part of their business model for taking on this full contract role. And the other important, and that, if you try and, analyze the annual cost of maintaining a vehicle, if that's in the, jump in here, Patrick, I've got this way off, but if that's in the, $7,000 range, you're talking about 4 to 5 vehicles, that's $30,000 a year. That, again, would be additional cost savings over time. And then the other important factor is the pricing structure that Charles Abbott has proposed for us is such that when work volume exceeds $60,000 a month, the share back in permit revenues drops from 68% to 60%. And when we exceed $100,000, the share back shifts from 60% to 55%. And I think safe to say that in a typical year, most months would exceed that 60,000 amount, and some months would exceed that $100,000 amount. So, kind of back of napkin numbers to think about for that. I mean, if half of the revenues, if we have a typical revenue year of about $1 million, if half of those fall into that 60% range, you're saving 8%. So, who has I can do a calculator, but if you multiply 8% of half $500,000, that's tens of thousands of dollars as well. So I think we think that on balance, it's probably pretty revenue neutral, and we think it's going to be actually a really good business model for customer service. The beauty of having a contract firm is they can ebb and flow their staffing to meet exactly our resource needs, right? So if on something like plan review, we typically quote 4 to 6 weeks for commercial plan review and 2 to 4 weeks on residential plan review. And those are certainly at or in most cases well above industry standards for the Front Range. But if we can do better, we'd certainly love to do better, right? Well, working with a firm like Charles Abbott, I mean, they have plans reviewers that are working remotely in, all over the country. So it's easier for them to just get the right person to look at that plan review and get those turnaround times probably better than what we're doing right now. Same thing on the inspection side of things. If we need 6 inspectors, they can accommodate that need. If we need 2 inspectors, they can also scale back and accommodate that need. So that'll be in their court to just meet our work demand as that ebbs and flows more fluidly than we can with permanent staff that we don't hire and fire kind of on a dime. A couple final notes, but it's certainly very important to acknowledge that we have 3 fine employees in the building division right now, 2 permit techs and 1 combination inspector. We want to make sure they're made whole, and as a result, we've asked Charles Abbott to make each of them an offer of employment if this contract is awarded. Upon finalization of the contract, each of those employees would be offered at or better compensation package. We've evaluated the benefits package for Charles Abbott, and it's very comparable to our benefits package, better in a few areas. And so that's an important thing to make council aware, that those employees will be offered that full-time employment, and very likely, unless this could certainly change, but very likely will be assigned back to their positions in Wheat Ridge as part of a Charles Abbott employee. So really is seamless of just they're getting a paycheck from a new employer, but their roles will remain largely the same. We are eager to move in this direction, which is why we're here in front of you today. We'd like to, if we can get through the contracting matters with our purchasing office, we'd like to get this in front of City Council for a contract award on February 12th, if at all possible. And I'd be glad to answer questions.
Are there questions of staff? Ms. Davis.
I'd like to understand more about the contract. I guess I'm used to working some contracts, and will there be some metrics, expectations, quality metric type of things that are required? I know one of the things you just brought up was the time frame in which, a plan review or those types of things. So I guess my question is, will there be some quality metrics within the contract so that we can judge the value of their services? And then also, a part of that quality metric, will there be some kind of, this might be tough, but I don't know, it might be possible, some kind of even customer service or, some survey or something even, just to see that our residents are getting, we are exceeding or, improving to our residents the services as well. So I guess my question is I'd like to see some kind of quality metrics in there, or at least guidelines as far as turnaround times, et cetera, and that they're met, and then some kind of quality metrics if possible.
Yeah, those are all great comments. The quick answer, I think, is yes. I mean, the contract terms require reporting. They require that they meet or exceed our current metrics for various building division functions like turnarounds of plan review. It's fairly general in the contract, with the intent that those would be further fleshed out as we actually go under contract. And there's a lot of kind of reporting systems that we just need to get in place once they're under contract. They're not specific in the contract as of yet, though we could work on that as well. But it's definitely contemplated that they will exist.
Yeah, I'd like to see them a little bit more general. I mean, not general, and more specific, because what's the point if they're general? It's like, oh, you'll do your best to get it done. Well, we did our best. But, I mean, if there is some kind of industry standard, or they might have other contracts with other folks that they have certain expectations for turnarounds. So I'd like to see if there's more specifics, because that's kind of the point, is to have some expectations.
Certainly, yeah, and if I'm just maybe unclear on that. They will be specific. I think
All
it was
right.
just in the contract there, it's just kind of general that we will establish performance metrics, formal performance metrics, and it's just they haven't been established yet, other than, as I said, that they will meet or exceed our existing performance metrics on things like plan review.
So wouldn't that be like an addendum to the contract, though? Because they'd have to meet, I mean, you'd think that that would be a part of the contract, right?
It could be. It certainly could be.
I think so. Just saying, just wondering. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, Charles Abbott is here.
Thank you, thank you.
Ms. Hoppy?
I have a couple of questions, but just to piggyback on Christie's point, along the lines of a community member working with the now new building department, which is not under our purview anymore. How, like, if there is a complaint, like, there's a very clear line of how you go up the ladder with complaints. And so, like, how would a community member be able to take their complaints kind of up the ladder if it's no longer?
Another great question, and that it'll really work the same way it does right now. So there will be a Charles Abbott employee that will wear the title Wheat Ridge Building Official. And so if there's an inspection call out in the field that a contractor or business owner or property owner feels was incorrect in some manner, they first bring that up with the inspector. If the inspector doesn't have the answer that they think they want, or they run that up to the chief building official. And ultimately, if that is not a satisfactory resolution, it comes to the community development director, and from there to the city manager. So that really won't change. It's just the chief building official won't be a city staff person, but there'll be a full-time chief building official with all the necessary qualifications that will function in that role.
So the CBO will still report to you?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, they'll
not to Charles Abbott. They report to you.
It's a little bit of a hybrid. I mean, I will have, and this is in the contract. I will have regular meetings with them to, understand policies that need to be developed, or get updated on specific projects, or talk through any kind of issues that I would normally talk through with my building official. But they will be kind of an employee, right, of Charles Abbott. So in terms of performance expectations, be a combination of, I won't be conducting an annual performance evaluation, obviously, because that'll be something Charles Abbott will be doing. But we will be setting performance expectations in those weekly meetings and resolving issues on an ongoing basis.
So, so does Charles Abbott have an established branch here in Colorado, or will these employees be ones that are shipped in from other states?
They do have a branch. It's in the Interlochen area in Broomfield. They're trying to, to grow their presence here in Colorado, and obviously this is a part of that. I think we could ask Charles Abbott, and again, they're here tonight, so Jay, Randy, and Rusty are all here to answer questions if you have them. We anticipate maybe a combination of things. As council is aware, the majority of those inspectors that have been out in the field are here remotely, right? So their home is likely in Nevada or Georgia or California, and they've been working remotely. I think we all hope that model will change. It's not really a sustainable model for Charles Abbott or for those employees. I think some of those employees may end up being offered an opportunity to move to Colorado and relocate. It will be a multi-year contract to incentivize Charles Abbott to take a permanent approach like that. And so that will be one option. Of course, the 3 employees, if they accept employment with Charles Abbott, will be based here. But I think the desire is to have people working here largely that live here, just because I think that's a better fit for those employees in terms of their work-life balance, and certainly a better fit for Charles Abbott in terms of their pricing structure, where they're not paying per diems and hotels and car rentals for all their employees. So it could be hiring local, which they've been working on, and it could be bringing in some people from Charles Abbott that are existing employees that may see this as an opportunity to move to Colorado and work for this office.
Mr. Matthews?
Yeah, two of my concerns are consistency and continuity. And in order to have that, you have to have a reasonably stable crew assigned to the city. I used to do highway work, and everyone said they bid off CDOT specs, but when you open the project book, everyone's got their own little idiosyncrasies. I mean, Structure 1 backfill isn't always CDOT Structure 1 backfill. And one of the complaints I received when I was walking around the city and meeting people is that even for ourselves, when we would hire someone to fill in temporary gaps, we might get have gotten an inspector out of Boulder, say. And our inspector would have made the first visit to a site and said, well, this light socket or wall outlet has to be here. And the guy that comes back to revisit the site isn't the same guy. He says, oh no, it's got to be up here. And so that led to a lot of confusion. So when I say consistency I'm concerned, are we going to have a stable City of Wheat Ridge force of inspectors that get a chance to know us and the people that do work here?
I think the answer is yes. I mean, the three inspectors that we have working from Charles Abbott for us right now have all been, consistently here for, I think, at least 4 to 6 months. So Troy, Dan, and John have all been working here. This has been all their work for many months, and they may very well continue. They certainly will be for the foreseeable future. Randy is the new Denver office manager, and he's been a consistent presence from day one since we started on April 18th with the contract with Charles Abbott. So that's certainly the desire. In terms of the first issue you brought up, in terms of consistency on kind of calls that you make, we make every effort to have repetition on projects, to get the same inspector out there to make sure that you're not making a different call at final that you did on rough, because it's a different person. You can't be 100% perfect on that in terms of having that same person out there. And certainly we try and document, everything in terms of our inspection records and whatever corrective actions that are called, so that it's clear, what call was made at a rough inspection, so that it shouldn't be, that the inspector doing the final should be able to look at that and say, well, I can't make a new call if I wasn't the one that was here. This is how we called it on the rough inspection, so I can't change the rules. But good, important things to be aware of.
My other concern would have been the CBO part. Will he be stationed here? Or will he have an office space here at City Hall?
Yes.
So that, excuse me, I'm just concerned about a cohesive team effort, that everybody knows what everybody else on the team is doing and how it reacts. And I'm just concerned that if we don't have a stable workforce here, that there can be a lot of confusion going on down the road.
Yes, that is correct. And Larry, those were some of my concerns when Ken first brought this to me and when we were considering this model. And we really think this model actually provides many more benefits with that, with the consistency and the continuity and the, again, based on the things that Ken said. And with a longer term contract that Charles Abbott does commit to providing us with the same folks. And again, the intent too is that this workforce is not any different to the outside, that on the outside they're seen as City of Wheat Ridge employees. It's just that we're under contract with them internally. So the whole thing is really hopefully not to have an impact on the community, but hopefully have a good impact that we're providing that more consistency and better turnarounds and better customer service.
So then we would expect to have a chief CBO housed on site with the permit techs and inspectors housed on site. So those same inspectors, so that the contractor in the field would be looking for the same inspector to come and do his inspections. So really Charles Abbott then is going to be a labor broker for us? I mean, the perception that we want to put out to the public is that these are employees of the city of Wheat Ridge, right?
Yes.
Only we're paying a labor broker to bring them. And how are we going to compensate the broker on an hourly basis or contract basis or a percentage of the fee or?
Yeah, it's the percentage of fee. So again, for the first $60,000 on a monthly basis, we will pay Charles Abbott 68% of the revenues that are generated, exclusive, of course, of use tax, which is a general fund revenue. So building permit fees, plan check fees, and contractor license fees will all go to.
They would get a piece of contractor licensing? Are they
Yes.
doing contractor licensing?
Yes.
So they're going to do the tabulations and the paperwork to keep up with the licensing. Thank you.
Yep, so they'd get a portion at 68% of all those fees. And then again, above $60,000, that fee drops down to a share of 60% is what we pay back to Charles Abbott. And above $100,000 on a month, if we have in the summer months, for instance, the portion from 60,000 to 100, the portion above 100, the revenue above 100 would be paid out at 55%.
So we get a quantity discount?
We do.
Okay. Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is regarding what has been the bid process or procurement process to handle this particular contract, and what other bids have been received?
Yeah, so we did a bid process for contract services in the first part of 2017, and Charles Abbott actually was the only full submittal that was submitted at that time. So it was a competitive bid process. We interviewed them, checked references, which we were very pleased with, and again, we've been operating under a letter of agreement because of the very quick nature under which we had to get them under contract when our previous contract firm frankly left rather abruptly.
Okay, and I guess this is a separate undertaking and scope of work and just a general framework that is separate from that previous engagement. So I'm curious as to how we go about doing that formal bid process, given that we have to adhere to our procurement rules and that anything over $25,000 has to be put out to bid. And knowing this appears to be separate, that's why you're bringing it to us now from the previous work, and I think they've done great work so far. But I just want to make sure we have an understanding of what the bid process is, and it doesn't appear as though there have been any other bids on this particular service.
Yeah, another good question, and we've certainly reviewed that very carefully with our purchasing office to make sure they're comfortable that this larger kind of scale of partnership is within the scope of what we bid out earlier this year, and they're very comfortable that it is. All of these services were included in that original bid in terms of plan review, inspections, permit technicians, chief building official services. Those were all included in that initial bid. It was just at that time anticipated that their volume of work would only be a portion of the work. I think it's important to note that even with our previous contract firm, we certainly used them in a very similar way as staff vacancies occurred. So the previous bid and the previous firm that we used provided us with CBO services on a full-time basis from time to time when that position was vacant, as well as multiple inspectors and permit technicians. So it's really just a question of scale, but the bid included all those components.
Okay.
Ms. Hoppy?
Well, the processes for becoming licensed and renewing your licenses, plan reviews, and applying for and accepting and getting your building permits, will those processes change or will they be the same?
Nothing will change initially. I think we're always looking for opportunities for improvement. So I think an advantage that we have with a group like Charles Abbott is they have a really deep team and seasoned professionals that have worked in a variety of different jurisdictions. I would certainly hope and anticipate that when we start to get in a groove, and I think we already are, because they've essentially been operating in this role for several months now, really, just because of we've been lightly staffed with city staff with some vacancies. But I think we'd be continuing to look for opportunities where they can identify an operational change or a procedural change where we can make improvements, based on their experience in many other jurisdictions in Colorado and of course in other states.
Mr. Johnson, why would we make this a multi-year contract rather than trying it out for a year?
Well, we kind of have tried it out for a year, in my mind. But we don't have to, but I think it's attractive for Charles Abbott to be able to go out to their talent pool and bring in the best people, right? So if they can go to their team in California where they have some people that want to explore a new opportunity, potentially in Colorado, they can go to those folks and say, this is a 2-year contract or a 3-year contract, and those people, whether they be individuals or families, can go and make that choice and decide that we're actually making a move. I'm not going to be living out of a hotel, but I'm going to move to Colorado because I want to, and I think it's a good professional development opportunity. So that's my motivation, and I think their motivation is I think we get access to the best talent pool in their organization if we make that multi-year commitment. It'll still have the standard out whereby if the contract isn't working out, we can exit within 30 days. Certainly that's not our intent. So it doesn't obligate us. I think it just sends the message to Charles Abbott that we want to form a long-term relationship here, and we're confident that it'll be a good one.
Mr. Matthews.
When it comes to the plan reviews, are those going to be on site or shipped off site?
It's a mix. I think the smaller permits we try and do on site, and that that'll be work that the CBO performs to some extent, and inspectors do if it's a slow day, and they can fill their time doing plan review. We do what we call rapid review on Thursday and Friday morning, so we always have a plans reviewer and a planner available to do certain classes of permits over the counter. For the larger projects, they would often farm those out to a technical expert that has the skill set, and so and they may be located wherever, right? And we take advantage of using electronic files to conduct that plan review. But for those larger projects that take multiple days of staff time to review, they can get those to the right person who has capacity to get that done quickly and has the skill set to make sure that they're competent for the more complex projects.
And that, again, was one of my questions. If that person's located in California or Missouri or somewhere, do we have an idiosyncrasy problem with him? Is that person going to be familiar with our particular specifications and processes?
They are, and I've spoken specifically with Charles Abbott about this. I mean, they literally will have all of our local amendments on their desk if they're going to be doing plan review for the city of Wheat Ridge. So they'll know exactly what it looks like in Wheat Ridge. They don't, so that it's seamless in that regard.
But there still will be local accessibility if someone comes in and needs questions answered.
Yes.
Okay.
Madam Clerk.
Yeah, believe it or not, I deal with the building techs at least once a week and sometimes 2 or 3. So this is scary for me. Ever since I've been clerk, the building techs that we've had have just been amazing. Michelle Pryor and now Kim, and they have a really excellent turnaround time for public information requests, because a lot of the times I can steer people to the Laserfish file. We are an amazingly transparent city, and I hear that comment a lot. Boy, you guys really are transparent. And but when they have to look in the microfilm file for any records prior to 1995, the building techs that we have now are just, usually within a few hours. And I get emails back from people in Virginia and Oklahoma and Florida and say, man, you guys are really fast. And I just hope we can keep that same reputation. And I don't know how it's going to, I mean, besides the personal thing of the idea of our employees that are good, the possibility that they would lose their jobs is really sad for me. But
there is no.
But as far as services, they are so good, and I want that level of
And that's not going to change, in the
immediacy and urgency to stay.
Yeah, nothing's going to change, and as Ken mentioned, all employees that are currently employed have been offered jobs, and I believe they've all accepted at this point. So we haven't finalized that, but so none of that will change.
Okay.
Mr. Matthews?
Yeah, I've been trying to work my way through this. With the fee set up the way you've described it, are we subject anywhere to potential change orders? Having worked with subcontractors a lot, if they think that they've stepped outside their scope of work an ounce, they want a change order and extra pay. And I'm even thinking in terms of how do we handle the ebb and flow of the work, such as overtime. Are they going to carry their own overtime when it's necessary? How will all that come together?
Yeah, that'll all fall back on Charles Abbott in terms of overtime. I mean, it's obviously they're motivated to, not, I guess, pay overtime when they don't have to, but get the right number of people here. But at the same time, they don't want probably extra people here, so sometimes it makes sense to pay overtime. The only, we've worked through kind of the full scope of services. In fact, I had a conversation with Jay and Randy this morning about kind of some of those nuances of making sure that there won't be change orders. That's certainly not anticipated and won't happen. And the only nuance is we're working through their role and compensation for conducting business license inspections. That is something that may be a small addition in the contract beyond the 68%, 60%, 55%, that there'll be a separate kind of payment structure for their role supporting the Administrative Services Department in conducting business license inspections. But otherwise, no, this is a full scope of work to provide all these services for this fixed fee structure.
Mr. Matthews?
Is there any bonding, and are there any performance, like LDs? I mean, performance penalties or whatever. I mean, if we don't feel like we're getting adequate responses, how do we handle that?
I don't anticipate performance penalties. I'm not sure what that would look like in this sort of a professional services contract. And in terms of, there'll be the city's standard professional services contract in terms of indemnification and insurance required. So those are all standardized, through our city attorney and purchasing office.
Are there more questions?
We do have this scheduled right now for, if we can get it done in time for the February 12th council for the contract approval. If not the 12th, potentially February 26th.
Well, the city is ready to move forward with this. Is there a consensus to let our building department go the way of our fire department? Ms. Davis?
Do you want me to make the consensus,
Or
or do
you-
you want me just to vote?
Do you have your hand up?
I have my hand up to vote. Okay, I'd like to make a consensus that we move forward to work on this agreement or contract so that we could set up a contract for these services to be provided, outsourced. Ooh, I hate that word, but.
Is there consensus? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looks like there's consensus. Okay. 5. That concludes our study session.
We need to make a consensus about this on this item. We need to.
Okay. Study session over.